Welcome back on this Memorial Day. We hope that you're enjoying this day. We are speaking with some veterans who have served our nation. We are now joined by a World War II veteran, Gunther Hetzel. Gunther served in the United States Navy on a light cruiser. And I just learned that Gunther told a bit of a fib in order to get into the United States Navy. And Gunther, I understand that you were not quite 18 years of age when you went in. How old were you when you went into the United States Navy?
I think I was 16 and 9/10.
16 and 9/10.
Yeah.
Here you are, a young man, 16 years of age.
Yeah.
The nation is attacked. You decide to enlist.
Right.
There must have been a lot of other things that you could have done with your time in your life rather than go off to war. Why did you choose to go in the Navy?
Well, I didn't really choose the Navy at first. I asked for the Coast Guard. And when I got to the recruiting office in New York, they told me that the Coast Guard enlistments were full. And would I like to have something that was close to it? And the Navy was the next closest thing. So, and I always liked the sea, and I always liked water and things like that. So that inspired me to join the Navy.
But you could have been at home, still taking some more time to get your life going. Why jump in at the age of 16?
I just felt it was my duty. I kept reading every single day and listening to the radio at that time. There was no television yet. That the right thing to do was to go out there and help your country. We needed all this young blood to get in there, and I was all gung-ho, and therefore I decided to join the Navy. I was on my way to college, to be exact, and the college was the Newark College of Engineering. And I decided, my main concern was I was sitting on the bus, and in those days they had little advertisements on the bus, and one of them was Uncle Sam pointing his finger and saying, "I need you." And I looked at that thing and I said, "He looks like he's pointing right at me." And I decided to join up.
Well, that's odd because talking beforehand, he really wasn't your uncle at the time, was he?
No, not really.
Tell us a story about how your family came to be in the United States.
Well, I mentioned to you earlier that my father and my mother and myself were all born in Germany. Karlsruhe was the town, to be exact. And my father had a premonition. This was just as Hitler was rising in power and Germany was changing its way of doing business and what have you. And my dad decided he didn't want any part of that. My dad was a veteran of World War I, but on the German side. And so he said, "I'm going to go to America," which he understood was the land of opportunity. So he came over here first by himself, left Mom and I over there, and he was a mechanical and an electrical engineer, and he learned going through school and things and the language and what have you. He decided eventually he could call or send for his family. So he had my mother and myself. I was 18 months old at the time, and I came over here, and we started our life here in America. So I had to learn the language, and I had to learn the customs, and my mother did the same thing. And a real small note is my mother went to send a letter. She told me that many times, back to Germany to her relatives, and she couldn't speak. I have to laugh. She couldn't speak English, so she took her thumb and put it on her lips and wet it, and then held it on what you consider an envelope. He would press it on the envelope and then smack it with her hand. And that was, she needed a stamp. So it was.
So, but you were not a U.S. citizen.
No.
Yet you joined the Navy. Was there a problem with you joining? You're not a U.S. citizen.
No.
The United States is attacked by Japan. Germany declares war on us. You are a German citizen.
Yeah.
You show up now to the Naval Recruiting Office and say, "I'd like to join," and they go, "You're a German."
Yes.
Did they want to know if maybe you were joining for the right or the wrong reasons?
No, I believe that when I was interviewed when joining the Navy, they had told me that there would be repercussions to some degree, that they would have to check up on my family history, and to see if there was any problems along the line. They found none, apparently, because it only took them, a day or so before I was able to really join. So that's what landed me in. But I do have citizenship papers for today.
I will come to that towards the end of this. So here you are, a young man joining the United States Navy, and of course there are, as young men often do, they have these visions of just going out and punching the other guy in the nose and glory. You show up at basic training, and tell me, did those visions quickly disappear as you got into the nitty-gritty of basic training? Was it different than what you expected?
It was a little bit different, yeah. I had to go. I was inducted into the Navy, and then I was sent to Sampson, New York, and that was for my 4 or 6 weeks of training. And of course, we didn't get training in marching and things like that, but we did get training in swimming, in underwater rappelling, because at the time when you're a recruit, you don't know whether you're going to be on a submarine or whether you're going to be on a above ground warship. So it was quite an experience for me. It was different than civilian life.
You then ship out on this light cruiser. What was the name of the cruiser?
The USS Vicksburg.
The USS Vicksburg?
She was named after Vicksburg, Mississippi.
When did you first see action at sea?
Wait a minute now. All right, we went through the Panama Canal. My first action was over near Saipan. That's, I can't even describe to you where it's at. But that was, we had duty as, you might say, it was sea duty. And we encountered a few Japanese ships. And the best we could see, we couldn't see them in those days. We had radar. And the radar would sort of pinpoint as to where the ships were. And the only thing that we could see were the plumes in the water of the enemy from over the horizon firing at us. And of course, we fired back to them. And that would have been action in the, I believe they called it the Coral Sea, or in that area. It was right off Saipan. That was my first action.
Life on board ship can be kind of tedious.
Yes, it can.
Intermittent with a few moments of sheer terror.
Yes.
Do you remember, even though you had your first action, do you remember what was going through your mind? Did you ever think at all, boy, this could be it, or not?
Yes, I will say that my first experience of where I was scared, if you can use that word, was I was in a bunker where they held ammunition, and it was way down below decks. And as the battle ensued, you could hear the plume in the distance of a shell, an enemy shell, hitting the water, and then whoom, making that little bit of a noise. And I became claustrophobic. And I got sick. And the guy said, "Get this guy out of here. They don't want anything to do with this one." So my next battle station was above deck, where at least I could see everything. And I felt a lot cozier. The only thing that scared me a little bit was I looked at the railing that I stood behind. I was in what they call a damage control party. And I don't think the steel was more than a quarter of an inch thick. And they said even a small shell will just go through that like butter. But anyway, that's the way it worked. I was above ground, or above the basic hull of the ship, and I could see everything that's going on.
You know, this Memorial Day, we certainly think about those men and women that gave their last full measure of devotion to their country. Yeah. But I also think of all of those that came home. Some of those men and women carry with them for the rest of their lives the memories, the scars, both physical, mental, and emotional from their time at sea. Do you find yourself at any time hearkening back to those days when you served? Are there certain memories that just come back and haunt you these many years later from World War II?
Not really. I guess I'm very lucky because I never tried to reflect back as to my experiences. I have been asked by family members and by friends from certain experiences that I might remember, of which I probably will relate some today. But it never worried me. I'm very grateful for that. It was an experience that I went through. I came out of the Navy in one piece. I came back home and started working on my life outside of the Navy.
Now, you took ill while you were in the Navy, did you not?
Yes, I did. On one of, I wish I could say which one, but on one of the islands, I guess you use the word contracted malaria. But while I was overseas, it never bothered me much. I would get some spells of high heat or whatever they would call it, but I never gave it a thought. And the Navy didn't bother me that much either. And the only time it hurt me or bothered me much was about 3 days after I was discharged. I felt very sick, and I was laying down at home, and my mother decided to call a doctor. And he was an old German doctor, Dr. Kassler. And he gave me blood work, and he examined me, and he said, "This lad has malaria." And he wanted to know about where I was. And I said, well, there were so many different islands and places that I was at, I can't really tell you where I was. But I was in the hospital for about 3.5 months. And that's where I met my wife.
Your wife?
She was in nurses training at the time. And she was in the United States Navy Nurse Cadet, how do they say it? If I said it right, Navy Nurse Cadet Corps. And she came into the room, and I was quite ill at the time, and said, "Good morning, Mr. Hetzel, Mr." And I thought, oh my, what have I got here?
So you were a civilian at the time, but
I was then a civilian,
but being treated as a veteran?
Yes, yeah. I had the choice of going to the Naval Hospital in St. Albans or going to St. Mary's Hospital, which was only about 3 or 4 miles from where I lived in Rutherford, New Jersey. And I decided I had enough of the Navy hospital, and I would much rather go to a civilian hospital, even though the government did pay for all the whatever it cost to keep me there.
And it has it reared its ugly head, the after effects of malaria since then?
No, once in a while I'll get I call it shakes a little bit, but other than that, no, because that's another funny story. At some point, 3 or 4 years hence, I got a letter from some doctor in the service of our country. And in the letter it stated, "Dear Mr. Hetzel, you have now been cured." And I never went to a doctor or anything, but I was cured because I was getting $7 a month disability pay for having had the malaria thing.
So they wrote you a letter, and that was the end of the $7.
So they wrote me a letter, and that was it. And I never bothered to contest it.
I noticed you brought some photos with us with you today, and I thought it was fascinating that you were standing there as history was unfolding. You were aboard the USS Missouri as the Japanese.
We were next to the Missouri,
okay.
I should say. Yeah, not on her.
Okay.
We were what they called at that time the guard ship. The ship was at basic general quarters. Even though they were signing the surrender of Japan, we were at the ready. And I had the opportunity to watch all this. And I watched as the Japanese, with their high hats and their formality of bowing and whatnot, came aboard the Missouri on a small Navy launch, and then climbed up the ladder and got onto the Missouri itself and were greeted by our dignitaries and General MacArthur. And then they sat down, and we couldn't hear everything, but we could see what was going on.
What goes through your mind as a young man? Here you are, having just gone through this conflict, and the enemy is surrendering. Do you reflect back on friends and comrades you lost, or do you just savor the moment?
I savored the moment. I really did. Yeah, I can. Of course, not having been on land to that extent, I went ashore a few times. I was brought out as a young man then. I was an electrician mate, and they put me on temporary duty for shore patrol. And fortunately, I had a fella, his name was Willie Munson. I remember him too. He was about 6'3", and he was my protector. So,
we're speaking with Gunther Hetzel. Gunther served the United States Navy during World War II. He went in at the ripe old age of 16. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back. We are speaking with a member of the greatest generation, a member of the World War II military, Gunther Hetzel, who has served our country admirably in the United States Navy, and at the ripe old age of 16, and by the way, was not a U.S. citizen when he went into the United States Navy. You know, I need to ask, you know, here you are in a cruiser, you're facing the Japanese, as similar to my father. My father's on a destroyer. You're in all these conflicts down the South Pacific, the kamikazes and everything. Did you lose any friends or buddies during the war?
The only fellow that I knew was a fellow by the name of Anthony Messinio. He was a neighbor of mine in New Jersey, and he was on the Franklin. And he wasn't killed, but he was injured severely when she was hit by a kamikaze also. And you notice I used the term she. All of our Navy ships were she's. How that came about, I don't know. But he was severely wounded, but he made it. And that was just a neighbor friend of ours as we lived, or when we lived in New Jersey.
Today, the United States has provisions that if someone is not a United States citizen and they served in the armed forces, that they will be granted citizenship upon completion. Now, there was no such agreement when you went into the military at the time, was there?
No, not to my knowledge. I only knew as a young man that I would be considered a citizen of the United States as long as my father was a citizen. My father having gotten his papers and became a citizen, I was automatically, but not in writing or anything, considered a citizen of our country, but not in any legal form or anything.
So how did you become a citizen then? Did you go out and apply for citizenship on your own?
Actually, yes. When the war was over, I had to go. I was living in New Jersey at the time, and I had to go to Newark, to the courthouse, and I explained my situation, such as I probably mentioned here, to the judge of who and where and what I was. And the judge took in all the things I had, and he said, we're going to make you, having served in our country, we're going to make you an automatic citizen. You don't have to go into this room with all the different nationalities, aliens, call it what you will. And I became a citizen and got the papers to prove it.
Being a German citizen while serving in the United States Navy, was there any retribution towards you as such? We were at war with Germany.
Yeah. The only thing I was told when I enlisted in the Navy was that I would never be sent to the German theater of war, because under the ruling of the German government, namely Adolf Hitler, I and my family, my we call them grandfather, would have gone badly for them had I been captured, or if they found out that I was now on the other side and fighting against them. So I wasn't sent over there. I was sent over to the Japanese theater of war.
Your buddies never brought it up or made fun of it?
No, never made fun of anything, no.
After the war was over, certainly you're in the South Pacific in that conflict against Japan. A lot of things come to light about what happened in Europe. How did your father react to the fact of what had happened inside of Germany after he had left? Did he ever speak to you about it?
No, my father was I will say, a gung-ho American citizen. He always thought, as I mentioned earlier, that Germany was going down the wrong path of politics. And he stood by the United States. In fact, when I came home after joining, he was down the basement making blowers at that time for some American company. And he shook my hand and put his arms around me, and he thanked me profusely for wanting to come out and help our country, which he considered America as his country.
You were an only child?
I was an only child, yes.
So for a lot of families, it was difficult to send their children off. But here you are, not a U.S. citizen, going off to fight on behalf of a country that was your adopted homeland.
Yeah, that's right.
And it is different from what we see today. Today, there's a completely different kind of attitude. You know, I guess my best question to you then is, here we are celebrating Memorial Day. You're called a member of the greatest generation, World War II. Yeah. What does Memorial Day mean to you, Gunther?
Basically, having served in the country, it's just that I'm grateful to have been in this country. It means to me freedom. It means to be able to do things that you want to do. It's just a grand, wonderful feeling to be here. I had a small envision of what Germany was like, because when I was 9 years old, my father sent my mother and I over to Germany to see one last time the grandparents, the uncles and the aunts and all that. And when I saw as a young boy the type of life that they were having then already, and Hitler was just basically coming into power and then coming back to the United States, it's hard to describe what a wonderful feeling it is to be in this country at that time.
Have you ever gone back to Germany since then?
No, I have not.
Any
no.
desire to do so?
No, I have no desire, because I know no one there anymore. All my family has been deceased. My mother had a brother who was killed in Stalingrad, and they don't know to this day, excuse me, whether he froze to death or whether he was shot or whether he was captured. They have no way of knowing. So, and we have sort of lost contact with anyone living out there now.
You know, America today tries to honor its veterans. And we had one fellow talking about, when each successive group of veterans come home, they should be welcomed by their fellow citizens. They should be welcomed by the men and women who served before them. And again, each conflict is different. Each situation is different. What's different today when you think of America's veterans and how we deal with the conflicts we're in?
I don't know if there's an awful lot of difference, to be honest with you. Being in the war background that I was in, when you're getting shot at, like my father used to say, a bullet is a bullet, in small terms. But I don't think there's much difference between, if that's the answer to my question, that the veterans are any different, whether you're in Vietnam or whether you're in Iraq or whether you did what I did out at sea.
Why did you opt not to make the Navy a career?
I probably could have. When I got out, I was an electrician mate third class. And if I had shipped over, as they call it, I don't know how it is today, they would have upped me one grade, and I would have become an electrician mate second class, and I would have had to stay in for 3 more years. But for some reason or other, I chose to become a civilian, and it led along the lines of my meeting my current wife and enjoying a really wonderful, wonderful life that I'm enjoying right now. I'm retired, but that's about what I envisioned.
And you retired from a local company, didn't you? You retired from a local company?
Oh, yes. I have a local company right here in Vermont, General Electric to be exact, of which I enjoyed a really great association, and I'm reaping, hopefully, in my retirement years, some of the benefits that I worked hard, self-praise, that I got from joining the General Electric company.
There has been an attempt at times, and I've got to ask you this because I remember asking my father about this on my program, to rewrite history. And I want to get your comments also about, there are those that said that we probably should not have dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that maybe we should have shown them the power of the bomb and they would have surrendered. And there are times when the United States is held up as being the aggressor because of us getting involved with the use of the first nuclear weapon. And I'm going to ask you. You were there. You served during that time.
Yes.
Any regrets? Do you think about dropping that bomb or those bombs?
Well, to tell you the truth, having fought the Japanese on board ship and what have you and all that, they were the type of people that would not surrender. And we had been told that had it come to the point where we would have to invade Japan, that it would be tooth and nail, and it would be a real tough fight. When I was there in Yokohama, this was right after the war, and I had a short stint on land. we noticed that many of the small children even had knives. They had sharpened weapons, and I think we would have been in for a horrific battle. Not that we wouldn't have won. I still believe we would have, but we would have lost a lot of lives on our side too. So unless you fought the Japanese, you didn't realize that they were a determined race. They would not give up. I had friends that were in Europe during World War II also, and they told me when the jig was up, the German would come out of his foxhole or whatever and put his hands up and say, "That's it." Not the Japanese. The Japanese would fight to the end, and you had to either kill them or destroy them in some fashion. They were that type of people. They were indoctrinated that they were God.
Gunther, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you sharing with us your service, and more importantly, thank you for your service to our country.
You're welcome, I'm sure. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.